we start again. It's been a couple of months, I think, since we last had a teaching. Now we finished the exams, so hopefully for the next 2 months until we leave for Bodh Gaya, we can continue having this, then maybe have a break over the winter. But the plan, as before, was just to continue going until we finish, so maybe someday, we'll see. This life or the next life, if we can finish. So we're in the middle of this section on relying on the teacher. So we finished there's 6 sections here, if you recall, because it says Sheni Densula Truk, right? So that the first we have, of course, the main sections of the text. So we have the preliminary sections of the greatness of the teacher and so forth, of the writer of the text. But then here we have Damngam Nugi Lobmajira Tribwe Rimpa, right? So the way that the actual way that you guide students with the instruction, and that has 2 parts. So Lamgit Sawa, Shenin the Densul, right? The root of the path, relying on a teacher, and then Dene Lojira Jamwetsu, right? So then after having relied on a teacher, then how you train your mind. So the first part is the relying on a teacher, the root of the path. So that's, in my book anyway, it's about it's about 44 pages in here, so it's a fair amount. So in that section on how to rely on the teacher, then we have Ngipekepe Chir, Chungse Trudejepa, so a little digression at the beginning, and then Kyongsungu, or the actual way of relying. So that actual way, then it has 6. So we finished the first one, Tencha Gewe Shinyan Dewi Shinikitseni, right? The definition of the Gewe Shinyan, on whom you rely. So there's lots of ways to think about that. We say this is the Parchin and Uma way to present that. That's mainly what's in the LAM.RIM. So the way that it's presented in the Prajna Paramita Sutras. So that's similar to what we have in the Jorlam section, the Yongzin, in the 2nd year of Parchin. We study that. And then we have when you study Dua, then you have the way of the Negi Lama, right? The way that the teacher within the Vinaya. So then it has its own presentation. And then, of course, in Tantra, there's a particular special attributes. But as you know, in this text, he kind of sets the ground for Tantric practice. So it's presented a bit with a Tantric viewpoint. And of course, the main difference there is to see the teacher as a Buddha. But in the Tibetan tradition, there's not always a strict distinction. It seems like whatever level you're at, there's always an encouragement to view the teacher on par with the Buddha at the very least. So that's an important part of the practice. But at the same time, as I think I've said, it's important to understand how to do that properly. It's not just a matter of you hold this strong belief that the person is a Buddha and you never question it. It's more, I think of it more of like my teacher Geshe Wanzange, who just became abbot. We were fortunate of Gyume last week or 2 weeks ago, was it? He says that it's not a belief, it's a duje, discrimination, right? That you practice seeing the person that way. You practice training your mind to see them that way. I like to think of it. He didn't say this, but I think of it as like when you're acting. I don't know if I used this example last time. Like if you're an actor in a movie, you have to train your mind to think this person is a particular character that I'm speaking to. I'm not speaking to Zopa. I'm speaking to whatever character he's playing in the movie. If you fall into this thought of which is my friend Zopa, then you lose the kind of the context, the drama of the movie. So it's similar when you're training on a spiritual path. You train to see this person that way, and that will become your reality if you train your mind that way. It has to do with an understanding of emptiness, the way that our reality is very much dependent upon what we create with our minds. And if we want to have a teacher who's enlightened, then that can happen if we train our minds to see the teacher that way. It doesn't mean that every single thing they say you have to believe and do. Even Lama Rinpoche, he gave me that advice when I first met him. Soon thereafter, he sent me a letter and he said, you have to understand there's a correct way to do this. It doesn't mean that you always have to follow the teacher's advice. It means that you have to train your mind to see their teachings as pure. And you should always analyze with your own wisdom. And if your own wisdom, you come to the conclusion that this advice might be not the right advice for you at the time, you don't necessarily have to follow it, but you have to maintain that pure vision. You don't want to think, oh, this advice is bad and therefore this teacher is unqualified. You think that, well, this advice was given for this reason and to help me train my mind, something like that. It's quite a subtle thing, and I think we have to be very, very careful. There's different extremes, especially again when you've taken a tantric empowerment from someone, then you really have to train yourself that way. And so, and like to say, sometimes I've heard this, not to point anyone out at all, but it's an important thing as an example. Somebody might say, "Oh, I can see that my teacher's, he has a little trouble with this and this thing. He doesn't understand this so well." It's really good not to say something like that if that someone is your tantric teacher. It doesn't mean you just pretend that he understands. If the teacher shows that he doesn't know how to understand a computer, you don't say, "Well, so I don't need to show you." But you don't go around saying, "Oh yeah, he doesn't really understand modern technology very well." If you want to say it in a respectful way, you say, "Well, he's showing the aspect of not understanding," something like that. But be very careful in the language, because this is, as soon as you start saying something, it's very different, I think, between having it in your mind and recognizing there's a thought there versus when it gets verbalized, it becomes a lot more concrete. And this slowly becomes your reality. And my teacher, he's out of touch, he doesn't understand things. And then that becomes more and more your way of thinking. Whereas if you always use very respectful language to refer to the teacher, then that will become how you experience them. And that will thereby benefit you more than anything else. Of course, there's the question of, this is a sidetrack, but what to do when the teacher behaves in ways that are not appropriate. And that's a big question, because unfortunately that does happen sometimes. As I was writing the synopsis of the tantric vows for this upcoming book by Rinpoche, so we added a section in the text, sort of a synopsis of the vows, because Rinpoche didn't comment on them a lot in his commentary on the 6th Session Guru Yoga. So it was up to me to explain some of the points. Mainly I was just explaining what Tsongkhapa said. I didn't put much of my own thoughts in there. It was mainly just reading Tsongkhapa's commentary and summarizing it. But in some of them, and especially, for example, this first tantric vow, I had written my original sort of essay entry into that. The commentary on that vow was still about a page, but I didn't get into. At the end, I just said something about what to do when a teacher behaves in a different, in a way that's inappropriate, and I gave some very general points of advice that said, it's not really my place to say this here. But I thought about it more, and I thought it really is an important thing, that it's a big issue these days, and I don't think it's any more these days than before. There's always been issues. So what I ended up doing was, I actually was able to locate a very good commentary that His Holiness had gave on this particular point, and so I inserted that into the text, about 2 pages. So that basically His Holiness's point was that if the teacher is behaving in inappropriate ways, because the traditional advice is that it's okay to distance yourself from the teacher. You need to, if you find that your teacher is doing something, for example, petitioning Dorje Shugden or something that you just cannot be part of, then you distance yourself. You no longer receive teachings, but you still maintain them as a view of them as your teacher, and you even can keep them in your merit field when you visualize, but you don't actively seek them out and take teachings from them anymore, and you may not follow their advice, but you don't get a negative view. But then the question is, what if, for example, your teacher is abusive? So I say, I'm not going to be around them anymore, but whatever they do to other people, that's their business. Well, that's a difficult question. His Holiness said it's a responsibility to point this out. If the teacher is being abusive, it's the responsibility of the student, for the sake of other people who might be harmed by it, to voice that and to point that out. So that's quite a difficult question. But I think even in that case, it's first of all, the most important thing is that you don't want to before you get into a relationship with a teacher, you want to examine them very carefully. So you wouldn't want to get into a relationship with someone as a teacher if that might happen. So to stop that from happening at the beginning, you have to be very careful. But if at some point it does happen, then it's still important, I think, to train your mind. It doesn't. At the same time, you might. His Holiness was even saying you might need to file a lawsuit against this person, things like that. And that, fortunately, I've never been in that position, and I don't envy someone who is. But I can understand that the reasoning behind it. That it's not just for oneself; it's for protecting the how do you say protecting the safety of others who might be influenced. But within that, whether it's possible to maintain the pure view, it's hard, I would imagine. I remember I read something by what's the one, the famous Nyingma teacher these days, Dzongkhapa, right? He was talking about the controversy with Soge Rinpoche that happened a few years ago, and he was saying it was advice to the students, and that some of you may have seen was quite controversial because he was certainly on the side of you still need to maintain pure vision of the teacher. And he was saying to the students something like, even if Soge Rinpoche fell into the water and was drowning, then of course you should jump in the water and save him from the drowning. But you should view that he actually has the power to save himself, but he's just manifesting this experience of drowning such that I, as a student, can purify my karma and maintain pure vision within the context of doing the right thing in that situation and saving him from drowning. So I would imagine that would be a very hard thing to do. And so, as I said, the main thing is at the beginning, be very careful about which teachers we choose, and hopefully that kind of thing doesn't happen. Fortunately, most of our teachers are not like that. That's just, as I said, a tangential thing. In the most part, it's not, well, certainly I wouldn't say it's easy to train the mind this way, but it doesn't have that kind of challenge. But no matter how qualified a teacher is, then there always are going to be people who find fault in the teacher. We've seen this. I don't want to mention specific examples because it's not really nice to say about it. But we've heard examples of people criticizing teachers who, from our view, what's the problem? This teacher seems very qualified. But as long as somebody has that, has a negative mind towards things, then it's very natural to find faults in things that may not actually have those faults. So this is what Tsongkhapa has talked about here, and he will talk about more in these coming sections. So we had the first section, the definition of the teacher we did. So next is Denche Lometseni, the definition of the student who relies on the teacher. So that's just as important. The student has to rely properly in order to benefit from the relationship. And then we have Deiridar Jemtebe Tsul, so the way of relying, and Denpe Peyon, the benefits of doing so, the Denpe Nimik, the faults of not doing so, or of doing so improperly, and Deraki Dunduo, so then the summary at the end. And so first we have Nipa, Dencha Lopmani, so Shibgyapale, this is the 400th dances by Arya Deva. So Serne Loden Don Year Way, Nipa Neche Chawar Che, Mao Yonde Nam Shendu, Migu Nipa Polang Min. So it gives us three qualities of the student. We cite in Parchin also, and also at the beginning of Tarlam Selcha, the Sema text we study here by Gyaltsabje. So this is, in the Gelong, they often quote this. So the three qualities are Serne, first of all, which literally means staying on the side, but the point is unbiased. That somebody who's willing to see the situation as it is and not fall to one extreme of saying it's this or that. And then Loden, meaning have someone endowed with a mind, it means that someone with discrimination who can think what is correct, what is incorrect. And the Donyerawa means that they're striving, or the interest, really, aiming. So they're interested, they're actually interested in the teaching. If somebody could be very intelligent but not really have any interest in something new, then it's very hard to benefit from it. So, Nyempo Nu. So that's the listener, who is the vessel, who is the proper vessel for the teachings. Che Chawar She. So that's called a proper vessel. So Mao Yunden Nam Shendu Migur Nyempopo Lang Min. So the teacher also, the Mao, the one who speaks, also should have not other qualities than that. The teacher should also have those qualities. Migur. So they shouldn't change to something else. And Nyempopo Lang Min. And the student should also be that way. So if both sides have that, then it's possible to benefit. In Kapshipa, in Parchen, you'll get to the section Joy Kyun. You would have read about it in Dondunchu this year. But it's just words in Dondunchu. When you get to Chapshipa, it's actually very interesting. It has the 46 faults of application. It means that the 46 ways that the teacher and student relationship can go bad. And there's all these different ones. Some are from the side of the teacher, from the side of the student, some are from both, some kind of mismatch. And it's all very relevant. It seems that you can imagine how these kinds of things could happen. That the teacher prefers to stay in isolated areas, but the student likes to live in the city. Or the teacher would like some offering of food, but the student doesn't want to give any. Things like this. So if that kind of thing happens, then the relationship doesn't go well. So there has to be a good match between the student and the teacher. So Chu Sun Tan Dempashik. So somebody with these three qualities, Nyempe Nudu Rumwa, so that they're suitable to be a hearer of the teaching. Rumwa Tam, De Sum Tsangna, so if they have those three, then Chomo Bo Yundin Nam, Yundin Du Nangi. So if they have those qualities, then the qualities of the teacher, the Chomo Bo Yundin Nam, Yundin Du Nangi, so they will appear as qualities. When the student has those qualities, then the teacher's qualities will appear as qualities. Kyundu nawamidu migira, they won't appear as faults. There masay, so not only that, but nyempopo yonde nam kyang, gangsa de la dundi nangi. So then the student, the qualities of the students will also appear as qualities. And kyundu mina or sunde will also not appear as faults. So it's Nugi Tseni Dedak Matsangna, but if you don't have those characteristics of the proper vessel, then Chumawai Shenyen Che Yonsu Dakyang. So even though the teacher is very pure, Nimpopo Kyungi Wangi Kyun Chendu Zula. So by the faults of the student, the teacher will also become faulty. Meaning that if the student is full of faults, then even if the teacher is completely pure, they'll appear as faulty. To Chepapo Kyonyang, unit is impar, Jawale Sungso. So therefore, it says in the Drawa here means the Drawa to Shibgyapa, right? The commentary to Shibgyapa. So that's by Chandra Kirti. He wrote Shibgyapa Drawa. So it's saying that even the faults of the teacher should be held as qualities. So this is what I was saying before. It's a subtle thing. It doesn't just mean that if the teacher is doing something wrong, you say, oh, great. But you see that as the teacher is doing this as a teaching for me. Even if I have to distance myself from the teacher, that's my own karma that I have to purify. It's not something the teacher is doing wrong. It's my own karmic appearance that this is happening. Or whatever other way you want to train your mind, but always not to have it where you're seeing that this fault of the teacher is really a fault from their side, and I'm okay. It's the teacher's fault. So, Dena, Shenyan Seni Tamche Sangwashik Niekyang. So therefore, even though you might find a teacher who has all the right characteristics, Dela Der Rungoshe Pakawa, it's still difficult to recognize that's the case. Der Shene Tempala Seni Dirak Songoso. So knowing that and relying on them, you as a student have to fulfill these characteristics. So then it's going to go through them one at a time. So Dambo Suraneva, right? The unbiased. His Holiness often uses this word. If you ever listen to his teachings, he often talks about lo Zuranepa as being a very important quality for. And he doesn't say it just in terms of the students, but just in terms of often when he's talking about somebody he admires, he talks about how they are lo Zuranepa. He thinks that's a very important quality for someone to have. So choklong mepashik, so they don't fall to one extreme. Choklong mepa, de De yona, de dripne. So if they do fall to one extreme, that will obscure them. Yonde mi tongwe, and they won't see qualities. Leper shepe don minye de. So then they won't find the meaning of what's being said. So umaningpo is legdenchir, bave veka. Choksu longwei sem dongwei. So through falling to an extreme, your mind is agitated or anguished. Shiwa nayan dot megur. So then you will never understand peace. Shezum bataro. So choklongi. So what is falling to one extreme? Rangi lokla chakbatang shengi lokla shedanwal. So it's attachment to one's own view, and then or hostility towards others' systems. Right? That he doesn't quote it here, but they have the quote in Umalajupa, right? So I translated this into an English verse. So let's see if I can remember it. The text analyses he didn't make for penchant for debate, but freedom's sake. If in explaining such as it ensues that other systems fail, no fault accrues. Wrong views are what is it? I don't quite have it. Wrong views are attachment to one's own views, and animosity towards others' views. So lay aside your anger and your greed, examine well, and swiftly you'll be freed. So this is Chandrakirti talking about Nagarjuna, because you see in Nagarjuna's text that he's constantly criticizing others. We debate this. It's a bit of a joke, but it was even our debate exam this year. They didn't say Nagarjuna, but they had this point about the Gelong has a vow not to criticize others. But then what if you're criticizing others in a constructive way? Does that break the vow? So likewise, Nagarjuna himself says in the Rin.CHEN.MO, the Precious Garland, he says by not criticizing others, that's one of the causes to gain clairvoyance. So then we'd argue, well, it follows that Nagarjuna was not clairvoyant because he was always criticizing others. So here is Chandrakirti saying the text analyses, he's talking about in Root Wisdom by Nagarjuna. He didn't make them for penchant for debate. It wasn't like he really liked debating and winning, but freedom's sake, but actually to understand, to help others be free of their wrong views. So if in explaining such as it ensues that other systems fail, no fault accrues. So if in explaining emptiness, you cause that somebody else's system of philosophy falls apart, there's no fault in doing that. It's actually a positive thing. Wrong views, he's saying, are attachment to one's own views, and then animosity towards other people's views. So it says, lay aside your anger and your greed or your attachment. So if you really want to understand, because this is in the section of his text on how to become a proper vessel to realize emptiness. If you really want to understand, you have to be willing to give up your own point of view. And you lay aside having attachment to one's own point of view just because it's yours, and animosity towards others. And he says, examine well, and swiftly you'll be freed. So if you do that, then swiftly you'll understand, because you're not attached to what something just because it's your view. What you really want to know is what is true. So denderwade rangi guladakne dorgote. So it's what he's saying right here. What it's saying here is examine your own continuum and then forsake or abandon. Meaning, like, if you recognize that you have some kind of wrong view, then get rid of it. Don't think just be attached to it. So dande sembe Tsongkhapa lay. So that it's a bit unusual phrasing. The Tsongkhapa is a party moksha, right? But that is a bodhisattva party moksha. Really, it's a rules for bodhisattvas, but usually we separate the party moksha as the monastic discipline. So it says rangi dopa tangde. So set aside your own assertions. Kempo tang lo bongi shungla rabdu nepa tang guba chao. So abide in the systems or the teachings of your Kempo and your Lopon, right? Your abbot and your preceptor, and show that and have respect for them. Show respect for them. So again, this is what we were saying before. It doesn't mean if you know that your teacher has a view that you don't agree with, that you therefore say, well, I'll agree with it because my teacher said so. We have it right here with the example of Atisha and Tsongkhapa, that Tsongkhapa had a view of mind only, and Atisha didn't agree with that. So it doesn't mean you just give up your own point of view if you've established it through reasoning. But I think it has more to do with what I want. If your teacher wants to do something and there's no particular harm in doing it, then we'll do it this way. I'm not going to insist on doing it this particular way. And of course, if you do have some kind of philosophical point of disagreement, to be very skillful and probably best not to voice it directly with the teacher, or not to try to convert his students to your point of view. You have to be very careful of how you go about that. So Deit Samgi Chokam Nyama. So if you think, is that merely enough? And a Zurane Kyang, so just because you might be unbiased, Lekshe Lam Yang, Lekshe Lam Yandapatang, Nyeshe Lam Tanang Ni, so that the purity of the correct path and the faultiness of the wrong path, teaching. The purity of the proper teaching. Lekshe Lam, Inshe Lam. Yeah, it's an odd. So actually, it's okay. So you know that the teaching, the good teaching is a correct path, and the bad teaching is a faulty path. That's what it's saying. So if you don't have the power of mind to discriminate those two, and then then you're not a proper vessel. Deni kowe lo tang dembagoso. So you need to have a mind that understands those two. Deni ningpo mebe chok dorne ningpo leno. So with this, you abandon the wrong side, right? Ningpo mebe chok. The wrong is essenceless or kind of pointless. And ningpo leno, you take the essence. So it's talking about you make your life meaningful. You abandon this pointless things, because you can distinguish what is and is not something that's worth relying upon. Deni Sangi Chokam Nyamno. So even, are those two okay enough? So Deni Yukyang Rimo Chunyentar Mitsomna Nudemi Rongwei Doni Niewe Chemputang Dembagozu. So it's saying, the basic point is pretty clear. It's saying if you don't start to listen or have interest in listening to the teachings, then you don't become a proper vessel. So you need to have a very strong interest. Don't hear Chempo Tang Dempago. But Rimo Chunyentar. So like listening to a portrait of the Dharma. And I'm not sure. I have to look in here what they have. Okay, so it says it's like a drawing of a person listening to the teachings. Rimo Chunyen. So actually, Chunyen here means a person. Chunyenpa. So like a drawing of a person who's listening to the teachings. The idea is that you're showing the aspect. You're just here listening, but you're not actually interested in what you're doing. It just externally looks good, but you don't have any internal interest. So probably he's just taking this from right here, from Chandakirti's commentary, this example. So we have Chandakirti here saying, Chodan Chumao Lagupatang. So the first is respect for the teaching and the teacher. And then Itupani Nene. Oh, so he adds two extra qualities, right? We had Zuranepa and then Lodandemba and then Dundunirwa. So he adds two more. Chodan Chumao Lagupa. So respect for the teacher and the teaching. And Yitupa, paying attention. So nen is to add. Nga sungso. So then he said there's 5 qualities that you need. So de tarna chula donir chewa. So the first is interest in the Dharma, great interest. Nyepetse ila pertupa. So when you listen, you pay attention. Churan chumawala gupa chempo jokpa. So then you have great interest in the teacher and the teaching. And nyeshe dorne lekshe zimpa de shio. So then you cast aside wrong teachings and you adopt good teachings. So there are 4. So shipa de tunkenni. So what is the concordant condition for having those 4? I'm just thinking. So we had the 3 from the main the verse, and then we have 2 extra that he added. So I think what it looks like here, we have the first one is the donir, that's in the verse, right? Then we have the second one, yitupa, that's added. And then chu mawala gupa, that's added. And then yenshe dorwatang lekshe zimba, I think that includes the other 2, right? Zerwa nepa and loden. So if you are unbiased and intelligent, then you will discard the wrong teachings and adopt the right teachings. I think that must be how they all work together. So shipa de tunkini. So the way to develop those 4, the concordant conditions you need, is lo tan dempa yinla. Oh, I see what he's. Okay, here what he has is that those are the basis for those other 4. The first 2, intelligence and unbiased, are the basis for developing those other 4 qualities. Because he says it's the concordant condition is intelligence, and then you need to discard the discordant condition and be unbiased. So the discordant condition would be to be biased. So lame chi renwei chu de nam. So the Dharma that is suitable to be taught by the teacher. Sangma dakla sangna gawagong. So you need to check: is it complete? Is the teaching that the teacher is giving complete? And if so, then you should cultivate joy in that. Matsangna chimatsundirit samwe gulape parcha gube. I see. It's actually not saying. So here, chu, I see. It's not dharma. It's the qualities. So you should check for yourself if you fulfill those qualities. If you're suitable to be taught by a teacher, and if so, you should take joy in that. If you don't fulfill those qualities, then you should find a way to cultivate them so that you do in the future fulfill them. Beper cha gyupe, dengi chu de da sheper chede. So then you need to know the qualities of someone who relies on a teacher. Dirak seni mishena. So if you don't know them, dokcho mijukpe, then you won't engage in analysis and examination and analysis. Don chempo lenyam pergyuros. Then you will fall away from a great purpose. It's the same thing he says in Tarlam Selche. At the beginning of the Zema text, he says this exact same point, Gelsepche, that when you in regard to this stanza from Shivgapa, that if you have those qualities, you should rejoice. If you don't have those qualities, then you should find a way to cultivate them. So then Sumpa is Didar Tempe Tsul, right? The way of relying on the teacher. So Detar Nu Tan Dempa De. So as a person who has those qualities of a proper vessel, Lama Tsinitan Den Miden Gonda Shipatar. So then whether or not they rely, they should lepradakla, yeah. So they should examine whether the teacher does or does not have those characteristics that were explained earlier. So Sinitan Dempala Chugi Kandrin Nuperchade. So if they find that the teacher does have those qualities, then they should receive from them the kindness of the Dharma. Deyang gewe gishitumpatang sampupanigi nampartawa mitunde. So it's saying the biographies of Geshitumpa, Tromtompa, and Sangpupa, they had slight difference in their biographies. They didn't line up together. So Tsongkhapa Lama Mang de Shetse La Nyempe. So Tsongkhapa, he relied on many teachers, and he listened to all of what they had to say. Shetse means all of what they had to say. Kamne Jumpe Lam Kar Gewe Ginyan Chik Chushigi Du Palayang. So yeah, when he was on the road coming from Kam, right? Ginyan Chik Chushing and Dupa Layang Nyempe. So he even listened to the teachings of a Ginyan, of a layperson, on the road as he was coming back from Kam. Kornamgi de la Nyempatang Shenjepe Kinam Deke Master Nala Pempani Jungsungke. So a Kora means all of his retinue, right? So de la Nyempatang Shenjepe, I think that means the fact that he was listening to to the teachings of a layperson, they found inferior and not proper. Tangzhen chepe, kenam dike mazer. And then so he said to them, right, so because of that, he said to them, Tsongkhapa said to his students, don't say these kinds of things. Pepani jung sung. I received two benefits from this, from listening to this layperson. So I think what I said there, they were discordant. It's not that they were in discordant with each other. It's saying that there's something here that's a little different than what we were talking about before. So Geshe Tompa Lama Nyungde. Okay. So it is saying Geshe Tompa, he had few lamas, whereas Tsongkhapa had a lot. Ngale mepa la, so he had no more than 5. Potawa tong gombor chen lamanigi dini gan leka tropala. So based on that, then Potawa and Gompor Rinchen, who were students of both of those teachers, Tsongkhapa and Tompa, right? Geshe Potawa and then Gompor Rinchen, they were discussing what is better and worse about these two, like Lekka, the good and the bad, and then Tropa means discussing. So Lo Ma Zhangwei Kyun Tongxing Madepa Kewe Ringla. So he's saying when your mind is not trained and you see faults and you generate non-faith, during that time, then Geshe Tompa Luk de Lekpa Ka Champe. So they decided that at that time, that it's better to do like Geshe Tompa did, because you don't have many teachers, just a few. Dedhar Char Sumpa de Shindu Mepar Nawe Dedhar Chao. So that what they said, Tsongkhapa is now saying what those two said was very true. Mepa means true. Mata me, right? There's no drembu. So that it appears to be very true. So do like that. So Detar Kandrin Nupa Chi Tang Kiperdu Yonsu Zobe Dangaki Lo Lapatripe Shinyan De Tita Dembitsu Ni. Okay, so that part's finished. He's now introducing the next section. So once having taken the kindness or received the kindness of the teaching in that way, so especially Yonsu Zobe Dangaki, so with the complete teachings, complete instructions, Lepar Triwe Shinyan, the teacher who gives those complete instructions, Deter Debetsul. So how do you rely on them? So Sampe Debetsul, Tang Jorwe Debetsul. So the way you rely on them in thought and the way you rely on them in action. So Dambol Asum, the first how you rely on them in thought. Depe Sampa Chir Deba. So the general way of relying on them. And then Keperdu Sawa Depa Jama. So then especially the root, which is to train in faith. And then Kandrinde Sudrende Guparchao. So then remembering their kindness and generating respect. But that's often how it's presented. There's the two ways of relying on them in thought, which is that you think about their qualities and you generate faith, and then you think about their kindness in teaching you, and you generate respect. like in the sixth session Guru Yoga, some of you probably recite the verses A12 and A13, right? If you know the first section of sixth session Guru Yoga, you have 14 verses, the A section. So taking out the last one, which is 14, then the 12 and 13, those are respectively these two. Verse 12, when it says like more kind than all the Buddhas of the 10 directions in 3 times, right? That is the first one, the generating faith, and then all the 3 circles of the 3,000 world systems. The Buddha, this teacher is more kind than that, and that is the generating respect, which is mainly about understanding and thinking about how kind they are and teaching you specifically, whereas other Buddhas in the past didn't teach you specifically. So Dambo ni, so Dambo Kopa, so that's the array of stock sutra, Dambo Kopa. I think Ganda Vyuha in Sanskrit. I think that's the source for if I'm not mistaken, for the Sangchit Monlam, right? The King of Prayers. The last chapter of this sutra. So it says Sem Gu, so the 9 attitudes, right? The 9 attitudes for relying on the teacher we often have. Gewe Shenila Nyenkor Sumpani, so that's the way of Nyenkor, right? So relying on showing respect and service for the teacher in these 9 ways. Dembe Samba Tamjigi Ni Dupaho. So that is that condenses the main points of the intention of how you the way that you rely on them through thought. Sera kyani kana dera kyan duna. So those 9 also can be subsumed into 4. Duna shile rawan dorne rani lame wandu tonwade. So discarding rawan, like independence, and rani lame wandu tonwa, and then putting yourself under the power of the Lama, entrusting yourself to the Lama. Pu zanwa tabu semde. So like zanwa means intelligent, right? So like an intelligent son. You should think like that. So bu zanwa de, so the intelligent son, chawala rawandu mejugi. He doesn't engage in activities just by his own power. Pai mor tashing. So he looks at what his father is doing. De wandu tangne ngakshin chipatar. So then he acts in accordance with how his father behaves and follows his ngakshin chipa, like what he says. So gewe sheninging or tao. So look at the way the teacher is. Look there for your example, not just your own thoughts about what to do. So tandeki sange ngonsumpe, tandeki sange ngonsumpe ting is in like yang. Okay, so that's the name of the sutra, the direct concentration of the present Buddhas. De tamche du ranyam dorde gewe shenyen de lo shindu jupa chao. So that student in all ways rang nyam. So nyam can mean a number of things. It could mean to discard your own experience. I don't think that's quite the thing, but nyam also has, in some contexts, nyam can mean that you have a kind of what's the word? Like there's not a really good word in English, perhaps, to translate. It's not quite grace, but it's sort of poise or a strong presence, we might say. This person has nyam. It's like they say that about the umze. The umze should have nyam. He shouldn't just, if you want, the umze should not just walk around the monastery, even though he is a monk, but he shouldn't look at the other monks. He should look, this one is very poised, looks something very, has a particular air about him. So that the student shouldn't do that. The student shouldn't have this kind of arrogance about him. You discard that, and then enter into, in accordance with the mind of the teacher. So deyang seni samwa shikla chegi. So you should rely upon a teacher who's qualified. Su romala nasha jindu mitupa sungo. You shouldn't just, it's saying in the sutra, it says you should discard your own interest and act in accordance with the teacher's advice. But if the teacher is qualified, you should do that. Not just anybody. Su Romong, it's like whatever person. Nasha Jindu Mitupa. Nasha. So, Nasha. So the nose of the flesh, Jindu Mitupa. I'm not. It's some kind of, what's the word? Some kind of saying they must have, either in Sanskrit or in Tibetan. I see. It says you should not just let anyone lead you around by the nose, right? Like if you have a oxen and they have the what do you call the nose ring? There's a word for it, I forget. But yeah, so you don't just get pulled around like that. Nasha Jindu Miroma. So that Nasha must mean that. It must be the ring in the nose. So you don't just allow anyone to pull you around like that. So Zao de Sukyam Mi Chepar Temper Chepani. So okay, the first quality we already had was the discarding your own interest in acting in accordance with the teacher. So secondly, Zawa. So Zawa is friendship, right? So Sukyam Mi Chepar Temper Chepa. So it should be that nobody can split that apart. Your friendship or your relation with your teacher should be inseparable. Someone else shouldn't be able to split it apart. You should rely on them stably. So Dorje Tabusende, it should be like a Vajra. So the first was like a child. The second is like a Vajra, or an intelligent child. So Dutan Drikdrok Zugimi Chepaho, so that you're inseparable from Maras and non-virtuous friends. They are inseparable. They are unable to split you apart from the teacher. So do denile. So as it says in that sutra, Zawa midapa tam, mu midapa pawa tam. So abandon impermanent friends and impermanent relations or acquaintances. Shezungso. So then lame chawe kor tamche korani. So able to bear all of the load of the activities of the teacher, right? Lame chawa. We have that also in Dua. You have the word Shramanera. You might know is Getsu, right? In Sanskrit. It doesn't have any of the same etymology. It's completely different. That's unusual in Tibetan. Usually they translate them quite the same. But then in Sotik, right, the text we use for Dua, he quotes this Indian scholar. I forget the name of the Indian scholar, who says that the word Shramanera, he gives this etymology for it. It's like Ekashri, something, some Sanskrit word, and then written in Tibetan, so it's kind of hard to parse it. But he says that the meaning of that is eyes filled with tears, and so in Sotik in the Kunken Sonawa, he says that what that means is that the Getsul, it's like somebody whose eyes are filled with tears. They can't see very far. They only see what's right in front of them. So that a Gelong is a fully ordained monk, doesn't just focus on their own vows. They have to also think about the activities of the Sangha, the rituals like the Sojong and Yarne. They have to be the ones in charge of that. Whereas the Getsul should only be focused on their own vows and not worry so much about how the monastery functions. So that's his interpretation. But then in Jetsunpa, Jetsun Chuki Geltsen, he actually gives a different interpretation of it. He rejects that for some reason, and he says that it's lame chawala ngelshin dupa. So their eyes are filled with tears because they're so tired out and exhausted from following the teacher, doing the activities of their teacher. So that's what it's similar here, that they're able to just carry all the load of what their teacher gives them. So sai tabu semde. So like the earth can carry everything. So kur tamche kurawe yonsumi kyoho. So through carrying all of the load, they're not they don't get discouraged. So Potawa, he said, to Chengai Trapanama. So he said to all the students, or all the monks, but really the students of Chengawa, Kinge Geshi Janda Sempadi Ditabutang Traine. So you've met my teacher. He was also a student of Chengawa. So he says, you've met my teacher who's a bodhisattva. Ka Shindu Druptu Yopa Sonam Chewoho. So it's something that Ka Shindu Druptu Yopa Sonam Chewoho. And the fact that you're practicing in accordance with his instruction, that's great merit. Ta Kordamidroa Gendudroa Gishi. So don't let it become a burden. It should become an ornament. It should be a positive thing. You're thinking, I have all this, all the burden of the teacher, but it's a good burden. It's an ornament. It's something positive to have. Sheisum pataro. So korokorwana jira chawa the jukle. So it's if you carry the load, then there's what do you do? There's 6 subcategories. So that's what we said. There's 9. The 9 ways of relying on the teacher are subsumed into 4, because the last 6 are all included within this how to carrying the burden. So then it expands into 9. So koryuki ritabu semni. So it's the mind like a mountain. Koryuki, it's like a mountain in the environment, but the point is it's in a mountain. So dungal chi jong yang chi jong wa tamchegi mi kuoho. So whatever suffering arises, you're not stirred. You're not agitated by it. It's like a mountain. So Chengawa Rupana Shupatana. So when Chengawa was staying in Rupa, it's a place in Tibet, I think. Gompa Yonden Bar Drangwa Chewe Kam Shene Jo Shunu Drokla Dro Dugi Dro Shupe. So Gompa Yonden, I think, must be the person. Hold on. So Kam Shene would mean his constitution just got a bit weak. Dro Shuna Drakla. So then the Dro Shuna Drak Brodugi Dro Shuba. He told Shuna Drak, I'm going. Nemel Dewa Number Gyewe Kan Sangdu Depahang Chitsam Shik Chede. Yeah, I'll have to look. This is again as I said, the 12th century colloquial Tibetan. Yeah, so Gompa Yunten Bar, that's the name of the person. Gompa Yunten Bar is the person's name. So yeah, it's a Trangwa Chewe. So due to the great cold, right, Trangwa Chewe, his health declined. Kam Jene. So he told I see. He Joe Doogie is a question. So he asked Zhonu, should I leave because it's cold? So Zhonu Drak then replied to him. Okay, Nemel dewa Nabra Gyawe Kang Sandu Depayang Chitsam Shik Chete. So apparently Nabra Gyawa is a name for Indra. I didn't know that. So it's saying we stayed many times in the past in Indra's palace. Right, like in past lives, we've had all the great places where we stayed. So Tekshengi Chenin the Tenching Chunyapa Tare Le Manyawayimpe. Okay, so yeah, we haven't the opportunity to rely on a Mahayana virtuous friend and to listen to the teachings. Tare Le, like this time, Le Manyaway. So we've never experienced it except for this time. Choke de Chik. So he's saying, why don't you stay? Yeah, choke, it's proper, he's saying. So it's proper, why don't you stay as opposed to go somewhere else? So then, that's the man like a mountain. So then we have Gente Digi Drendabu Semni. So, Ren literally means a slave, but I think servant is a more politically correct way to say it. It's a little nicer. It's like the servant of the teacher. So, Ngen Le, Tamche Nyamsu Lama La Yang, Yi Mitrik Bar Drupade. Yeah, so Ngen Le, Tamche Nyamsu Lama La Yang. So, even though you experience all kinds of hardships in doing so, so that without your mind being agitated, you perform them, you actualize them. So Tsangdu Lopen Kunlan Ne Sa Sep Chik Chungwai Tempe Nasa Tamshe. Okay, we're getting back to the old language here. Silne Zapnam Chakte Gane Chung Cheme Par Sakar Kampu Yok. It's like reading Old English. Okay, let's see. Okay, so Sangdu Lopen. Right, Lopen here is a Tisha. It's the pension. It's talking about a Tisha. When he was in Sang, then and all of his translators. So Lo is the Lo Tsawa, right? And Panchen is a Tisha, the Pandita. So all of them together, they had to stay in an area of sewage and mud, it's saying. Ne Tsap. So Tsap is sewage. Sepchik, so Seb is within, in that. It turned out that they had to stay there. So Tumpa is a drum Tumpa, right? Tumpe Nasa Tamche Siome. So Tumpa, it means that he cleaned all of their clothes, right? Drum Tumpa. Sapnam Chakte. So Chak must be to sweep, right? So he swept aside all the filth. Kane Jung Chamepar Sakar Kampo Yok. So Kane Jung Chamep, I'm not sure, but it's Sakar Kampo Yok, because he covered it all with white sand, right, all the filth. Jo Duna, so in the front of Jo was a Tisha, Mandala Shikyang Drup Dukpe. He was able to offer him a mandala at the feet of a Tisha. So let's see. Oh, I see, okay. Seal, alright, so seal. The word seal can mean to remove, right? When I saw it, I thought it can also mean to clean. And so I was thinking, why would Drum Tompa would take off the clothes of all of his teachers? But it's saying he was taking off his own clothes. He took off his own clothes and used that to clean the filth. Yeah, so Kane Chung Cha Mepar means nobody knew where he got the sand. It's like he just had all this white sand and he covered it. No one knew where it came from. And then he note here. So it says in brackets, it's not in the text, but apparently they got this from a different source, that he made the mandala was made of stone and earth. There's a note that goes with it. Yeah, doesn't say anything particularly, but apparently from another source he knew that he made a mandala of stone and earth. So then it says Joje said Are. It's like great. Kyota Bushik Gaganayang Yu Shesum Patara. It says even in India I had a student like you, is what he's saying. I think that's understood to be quite a loaded statement. There's no note here as to explain that. But I remember hearing that. Because when Natisha said, we had one like you in India, there's a lot of debate about what he was referring to. And some people say it has to do with him saying he was an emanation of Chenrizik, which Drumtapa was understood to be. So he says, when we were in India, there was someone like you who was a dedicated student, like you. It was interesting also, I just noticed, I didn't look at this note before. but it would be good to mention this. So I had that section on the different students of Tsongkhapa. So it says here that he had 3 principal students: Potawa, Chengawa, and Puchungwa. So it says when Potawa, because we had that Potawa said to the students of Chengawa, "My Geshe," right? It's actually a term of endearment. It wasn't his teacher. They were all students of Tsongkhapa, but it was a term of endearment, and then calling him a bodhisattva as a praise. So it's not teacher in this case, Geshe, but it's a form of respect. It's like doctor, right? The word Geshe is like a doctor, so like Geshe-la. Not my teacher Geshe-la, but Geshe-la is another Geshe, another teacher. Okay, so then we have the Chakdara Tabusemni, right? The thought like a sweeper. Ngagel Tang, Chiwing Ngagel Tangche, number Pongshing. So abandon pride and great pride. Rang Lamale, Mawat Zimboho. So hold yourself as lower than the Lama. Right? I think in this case, pride and great pride. Usually we have 7 kinds of pride, right? But probably here, pride would mean that you think you're equal to the Lama. And then Chewing Agel means you think you're superior to the Lama. But then if they divide it into 7, right, you have like all different kinds of ways you can think of it. If you have someone who's very superior to you, and you think, well, yeah, he's superior, but just a little bit. That's another kind of pride. And then we have Ngubeng Agel, which is manifest pride, which is when you think that you have realizations that you don't, things like that. But here, there's just these 2. So pride and great pride. So Geshe Tumpe Shene. So from the mouth of Geshe Tumpa, Drum Tumpa, Naga ki Gambola Yuntengi Chu Mijung. So yeah, okay. So Gombo can be balloon. I don't think they had balloons in the 12th century that I'm aware of. It can also mean a bladder, right? It's also the word for the bladder, but in general, it's like any kind of thing you put in that it just expands and expands, right? So when you have if you can use the word balloon, when you have the balloon of pride, then good qualities cannot. The water of good qualities cannot. They don't rise. What's that? Yeah. Yeah. So I think the idea is that they won't. I think the idea is if you have a balloon and it's full of pride, then you can't put any water in the balloon. If you want to make a water balloon, if it's already full of something else, then you can't put the water in. So Chengawa said, Sugi Duna. So in the summertime, right? Sugi Duna. Read Samo Gong Tuane. So from the peak of the high mountain, Ngo Chor Jungi Onwar Dukan. So does like a billowing blue come from the top of the mountain during the summertime? Shombu Gan Mawane. So it goes down to the valley, I think. Mawa Onne On Do. So look, does it? What he's saying. I think let's look here. So in the planting time of spring, look whether the green growth comes from the high mountain peaks or from the low valleys. Okay. So Ngor Chung, it didn't occur to me. The word Ngo means blue, right? It's important to know in Tibetan it also means green. That's actually I've learned. I was surprised by that early on, but that's actually quite common in ancient cultures, that they do not have a separate word for blue and green. There's a lot of speculation as to why, but it seems one of the main reasons is that the blue was not a very common color before modern times. It's not a natural color in nature, very rare. And so most cultures didn't think to make 2 different words for blue and green, just like we don't make 2 different words for light blue and dark blue. whereas in Russian there are two different words. So in Tibetan, it's all different shades of blue. Green, blue. So when you talk about green grass, you say blue grass. That's why you can also often be surprised. Tibetans, they call what we call green vegetables, they call blue vegetables. Right? To them, it's a shade of blue. Dark green is a shade of blue. So here, ngo is what we would call green. So ngor chu, like it's saying in this. So there's a tall mountain and there's the valley. It's saying, look in the springtime. Does the vegetation sprout on top of the mountain or down in the valley? And so the place, of course, it sprouts down in the valley because it's a suitable environment. So you're going to get good qualities if you have a suitable environment for them to sprout. If you're very dry, like the top of the mountain, then you won't have any good qualities. And then tekpatabu semni, so the mind like a vehicle. I think, what do they call it? I think in the 9 way through Guru devotion, right? The 9 attitudes. I think it's cart, isn't it? Cart. I think so. Tekpa. I mean, it just means any kind of vehicle.
Boat to come and go.
Yeah, it is boat there, but here it's just the boat here is the last one. The best boat is the last one here. It's a drew. Is there one like a cart? I think. I'm not sure. I can't remember, but tekpa it would just be like a vehicle, right? So lame chawe shindu kawe kur chiwanam kyang tru shindu zimbaho. So one carries no matter how hard it is or how heavy it is, the load of the lama, one carries it with joy. Right? So these are the divisions of carrying the load, right? You know, it's rope. That's what it is. Because you have the rope carrying with a rope. Mm-hmm. So takpa would be rope. Tekpa, I don't know if in ancient Tibetan, maybe tekpa and takpa were similar. But generally speaking, in modern Tibetan, tekpa wouldn't be rope. Here it has foundation in the translation. But yeah, I think usually we have the rope that carries no matter how hard. So these are the divisions of carrying the load. So one of them is very specifically carrying the load, whereas the other ones are kind of related to that. So the ki tapusem, so the mind like a dog. So lame nyeshing sheyan de la mitroade. So although the lama abuses and scolds you, you don't get angry. So Gache lasula tolungpe jeoregi kabap jumpala. So the Gache lasu, it's a tanka maker, right? Tanka painter, but his name is Gache lasu. So Tolungpa was a Gache Tolungpa. So every time he met him, Kaba Jumpala, and when he was coming for teachings, Lasu Loma Nyakmowe Lopon Dio Kopon Lopon Di Okopon Latla Dawashik Duk Chepe. So the student of Lasu, Nyakmo was the name of the student. He said, this Lopondi, so this teacher, Oko means us. It's an ancient term for us, not so. Oko, so us, students and teachers. Pon, the teacher, Pon here is teacher, and Lop is students. Pon Lop La. Danwashik Duk Chepe. So he's angry at us, it's saying. Danwashik Duk Chepe. Kiki Kak Kyundu Goaham. So are you going to scold him? Or does he hear your scolding? Let's see. Kola ditabu ditabu renze regi heruke chinla. Okay. So every time he does that to me, it's like the blessings of Haruka. Tandrawa re'onwa sumbataro. So he said it's like every time he does that to me, it's like the blessings of Haruka. Yeah, so maybe more clearly. Each time that Dolungpa met with Geshe Lasu, Dolungpa would berate him. Okay, so there, Dolungpa was the teacher, that's the idea. Called kaba. Kaba must, in this context, I said is teaching, but it can also mean like a scolding. So it's every time he met with him, he scolded him. Yeah. So then, yeah, the Lasso Nyakmo, he said to him, "This master hates us, both teacher and students." So Lasso said, "Do you think that he's berating me? To me, it seems like I am blessed by Haruka each time he does this." Yeah. So Geshe Tolongpa. I've meant to check. You might know the Kensei Rinpoche, who just retired a few months ago or last year, from Lawa comes in. His name is Logon Rinpoche, right? So Logon is Lo Gompa, the monastery at Lo. That's what Geshe Tulungpa was at Lo. So I don't know if he's said to be the reincarnation of Geshe Tulungpa. I'm not sure, but that is the. It's a bit confusing. There are a bunch of people who were there. It was in it was in the book that translated by Rinpoche, the Mastering Meditation. And so there were several teachers there. It's sort of similar to this story. Yeah, there was I don't remember the name, but the Tolongpa and his teacher were at this monastery, Logon. So Ketompa Lekyan. So also, as it says in the 8,000 Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. So up to now we've been citing all these sayings of the Kadampa masters, but here now Tsongkhapa is also giving us a quotation from the Prajnaparamita Sutra. So Gelde Chomawadak Chudapadagla Nishing. So if the teacher, the ones who teach the Dharma, if they abuse the students who want the Dharma, misempa tanayang, and if they don't consider if they don't seem to be considerate of them, dila kyugi chirdoa michade, don't say don't do that. Lakvaryang chudununirwatang, so gain an even more strong interest in the Dharma, and a gujing mikyoe, and be respectful and don't be discouraged. De chishin drawers, so then follow after them. Sumso. Follow after them. I don't think it's a direct quote. I think it's a paraphrase. It doesn't look like the language and the way he's ended the phrase. It doesn't say sheisum, so I think it's just a paraphrase. But it's similar to like in the 8,000, the last chapter you might know I don't think it's in 8,000 actually. It's in 20,000 and 100,000. But there's that last chapter on Dakdungu, the Bodhisattva always crying. How he relies on his teacher Chopak, Dharma Arya, I guess in Sanskrit, Chopak. And there's that long story about how he tries to get teachings from him, and Chopak enters into the Gokpe Nyamjuk, right, the meditation of cessation for 7 years, and Dakdungu is waiting for the teachings, and finally, what is it that he needs to clean the seat for the teacher, or what does it need to do? But he cuts his
the whole field, kind of the way where he's going to.
Yeah, where he's going to teach, right? And then so he has to cut himself for the blood, and then he uses blood to settle the dust. Settle the dust. That's what it is. Yeah. So that's what I think what it's talking about here. That the teacher might show the aspect of being abusive, or even not considerate of the student, but the student shouldn't try to see that as a fault or say don't do that. They should see that as a quality to help them to purify their mind. And then Drew Tabo Semni. So then the mind like a boat, right? So Lama Chawa Lajitam Shukyang. So although you engage in many activities for the Lama, Drojing Onway Mikyoho. So you come and go without discouragement, like a boat. Okay, so that's we finished the first part, the general way of first part of how to rely on a teacher is the general way, and next we have the training in the root, which is faith, and then finally there'll be the part on reverence or respect. But why don't we stop there for today? If anyone has any questions.
Yes, we can hear you.
questions. One would be, I think that the FPMT version actually translates as an obedient son, rather than as
Okay.
a mind son. So I wonder, does it have that connotation, or did they?
It might. Let me see. I had written actually several ones here. It might. I've never. It's not a very common word. We've had it in text sometimes, and it usually does mean like intelligent. And so what I had in my text here, I had written 3 possibilities that I must have seen in the dictionary: brave, wise, shy, and then I had circled wise. But it might very well also have the connotation of obedient in certain contexts. And maybe, as I say, it's an archaic word. It's not something people use very much these days. So yeah, we should research that and see. Certainly that makes more sense. Although at the same time, the wise might mean that the son knows how to rely on the father properly. So in that sense of being obedient.
And then the second thought I had was regarding criticizing, maybe not criticizing, or constructive criticism while keeping a pure view. And I think what a lot was to hear the explanation also in the term vows you shouldn't discredit women.
Yes.
So basically, I think the most, like what helped my mind a lot was to say, never criticize them for being women. So, of course, like it's not like for example, in England or in Germany, we have a state leader, and you can't say, oh, this policy, you ought not to, you should change it, and you can't criticize this policy for the fact that that's a lady. That isn't the intended sense. I think. But I thought like the attempt that the teacher was essentially you always regard the teacher as pure, but basically like the to implement the teachings or the actions, you can kind of like I don't know if this to sever or to separate it from the pure vision and be critical with how to enact or how to take the instructions or the actions or the words of the teacher. I'm not sure if that's
Yeah. So okay, there's 2 different questions here that I understand. One is what to do if the teacher might, for example, the teacher is making a policy and you think that there might be a different way to do it, or the teacher says something that might be mistaken. And do you correct them or not? And then this question about the tantric vow about women, which is a separate question. So I'll address that separately. That's a good point. It's important actually that the teachers, if all the students are yes men, then the teacher, there might be problems. We see, like I think I mentioned before, with Venerable Roger, who I think get a very good example of how to relate to a teacher through his relation with Lama Rinpoche. And I didn't, as I said, I didn't spend a lot of time with him, but I had the fortune sometimes to see him with Rinpoche. And I noticed that sometimes he would make suggestions. Rinpoche might say something, not about Dharma teachings per se. I don't think Roger would correct Rinpoche saying that's a wrong teaching, something like that. But some kind of worldly thing, like maybe we buy this plane ticket or this or that, and Roger might suggest, well, actually there might be this and this problem in doing that. So sometimes that needs to happen. If a teacher is in the world functioning. We can say, well, unless they show the aspect of being a fully enlightened Buddha in every particular way, sometimes the students need to help them. So I think that definitely needs to be done, and that's an important practice. It's knowing how to do that skillfully. Not, as I said before, like if the teacher doesn't know how to use a computer, you don't think, he really does know, so there's no need for me to show him. You can think, well, he's showing this aspect for me to have the merit of teaching him how to use a computer. So it's a matter of how you train your mind, how you view the situation. You can do that without falling into the thought of the teacher is inadequate. So that, I agree with you that you have to, and with criticism even, there has to be times, like I said at the beginning, even if the teacher is not being manifestly abusive, there might be times when it's good to point out to the teacher that's not a very skillful way to speak or behave. because if nobody says that, then maybe it doesn't change. But doing so with being very careful not to thereby project this sense that this teacher is faulty and that I know better. The question about women, so there's the 14th mantric root downfall of denigrating women. So there's different ways. It seems to be different interpretations of that. Some people do interpret it as it's not criticizing women per se. It's criticizing them for being women and saying that women are inferior or something like that. But it seems that's not the way it's interpreted, at least. In the synopsis to that, I put several different interpretations that I'd seen, and I definitely wasn't sure Rinpoche's interpretation. But I think even when I talked to Geshe Namgyal Chöpel, who helped me with some of those things, he said no, that's not like a way to interpret what it's saying. Like he's saying, it's not about being women; it's just criticizing people who are women for whatever reason. But then there's the question of what there is this question of is if you just criticize women in general, right? So it's not you say women are bad because they're women, but you say women, they all do this and this thing. Then that's a root downfall. Well, whereas if it's only one woman, then it's not a root downfall, even though it's very heavy. However, if that woman happens to be an emanation of a Dakini, then it is a root downfall. So then you don't know who is a emanation of a Dakini. So that I think there was that kind of distinction. So it's not that the nature of the criticism doesn't have to be that womanhood is inferior to manhood. It could simply be that women are all stupid or something like that. Some kind of general statement about women. But then, again, if it's just one woman, it depends on whether or not she's a Dakini, and you don't know, so better to be careful. That seemed to be the conclusion. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it did. I just wonder, what would you do in the scenario when you say, "Oh, I don't think that we should send the soldiers to the Falkland Islands," and if Margaret Thatcher says we send, these soldiers to the Falkland Islands, you say, "Oh, I think that's not a good idea." Are you breaking that vow in criticizing the suggestion? I mean, of course, that's But
well, first of all, is Miss Thatcher or Dakini or not? That's the first question. But really, I think criticizing is very different than disagreeing. That's an important thing to distinguish, right? The point here is not that you should never point out someone's faults, or especially point out a point of disagreement with them. It's a matter of how that's done. There's a skillful way to do it versus the unskillful way. Really, whether someone's a woman or anybody else, you shouldn't criticize anybody in the way that it's talked about here, where you just project this is completely bad, and I'm here to tell you why you're wrong. Even if you have a valid point, it shouldn't be said in that way. It should be said in a respectful way, and be very careful with your own mind when you do so. That think about how you're conceiving of them, and that you don't just project a sense of I'm superior because I'm pointing out this fault. Like I said, that was what we had in the debate exam this year. Was as a monk, if you have the vow not to criticize, not to speak of others' faults, then what do you do if you want to do it? I mean, the specific example in that was it's talking about at the end of Gache. At the end of Yarne, at Gache, you're supposed to talk about all the faults that people made during Yarne, so that they can improve them next time. So do you break this vow? And actually, it's a bit difficult. That's why the debate is difficult, because if you look at the specific factors that are outlined in the text, there doesn't seem to be any allowance for saying things, what motivation you have. But that's why we debate. You have to find some way that you can make it okay, because obviously it's part of the Vinaya that you should do that.
Thanks a lot.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We can do the closing prayers now.
From my two collections, Praxis Space, Sera, from working with effort at this practice for a great length of time, may I become the chief leading Buddha of all those whose minds, wisdom, is science, by ignorance. Even if I do not reach this state, may I be held in your love and compassion for all lives, Manjushri, and find the best of complete great paths of teachings, and may I please all the Buddhas by my practice. Use a skillful means drawn by the strong force of compassion, may I clear the darkness from the minds of all beings with the points of the path as I have discerned them, and I behold the Buddha's teachings for a very long time. With my heart going out with great compassion, in whatever direction the most precious teachings have not yet spread, or once spread have declined, may reveal its spirit of happiness and aid. May the minds of those who wish for liberation be granted boundless peace, and the Buddha's cities in earth for a long time.
This created path to enlightenment, leaded to the wondrous, virtuous conduct of the Buddhas and their sons.
Those human and
Non-human beings who eliminate adversity,
conditions for practice in the excellent paths, never
be hard in any of their lives, the pure path praised by the Buddhas.
Whenever someone makes effort to act in accordance with the Eightfold Path and virtuous practices, may he always be assisted by the mighty ones, and may
The oceans of prosperity spread everywhere.